I have always believed that the best way to understand something is to live inside it quietly, without anyone knowing you're watching. My father taught me that. He built Harlow Aviation Group from a single regional carrier operating out of a drafty terminal in Ohio into one of the most profitable mid-size airline holding companies in the United States, and before he handed me the keys, both literally and figuratively, because he actually gave me a set of old brass keys to the original terminal the day I was named CEO. He made me spend 2 years doing exactly that. Watching, listening, traveling as an ordinary passenger, learning every crack and failure point in the system the same way a customer does. Anonymously, without the cushion of a title or a name badge that meant anything. That was 7 years ago. And even now, even after everything that has changed, I still do it. I still fly under my maiden name, Cara Ellison, instead of Cara Harlow. I still book economy seats on our own carriers using a personal card tied to an account with no flags, no loyalty tier markers, no executive access codes. I still show up to the airport like every other person who woke up at 4 in the morning and dragged a carry-on through security on 3 hours of sleep and a gas station coffee. Because if I don't do that, if I let myself get wrapped in the bubble of private terminals and pre-cleared lounges, I stop seeing what's real. And when a CEO stops seeing what's real, eventually the company stops being real too. So when I booked my seat on Harlow Air Flight 214 from Chicago O'Hare to Atlanta on a Tuesday morning in March, I was doing what I always do. I booked a standard economy seat, middle row, no upgrades, no special notes on the reservation. I packed a single carry-on. I wore jeans and a gray fleece and pulled my hair back and looked exactly like someone who worked a normal job and was heading somewhere for a normal reason, which in a sense I was heading to Atlanta for a board meeting at our regional operations center. Nobody on that flight had any reason to think twice about me. I arrived at O'Hare with plenty of time because I always do. One of the things I've noticed over the years of traveling this way is that the chaos at check-in and gate areas almost always starts at least 40 minutes before departure, and it always, without exception, falls disproportionately on people who arrived on time. The people who scramble in at the last minute seem to have some magnetic force that bends the situation toward them. So I arrived early, grabbed a coffee from one of the terminal concessions, found a seat at the gate, and settled in with my phone and a binder of financial projections I needed to review before the board meeting. The gate agent on duty that morning was a young man named Brent. I know his name because it was on his badge, and I noticed in the moment I sat down because he had the slightly harried look of someone who was already managing a complicated morning before most people were even awake. He was at the counter talking in low, urgent tones with a colleague, a woman whose badge read Shelley, and even from a distance, I could read the body language of a problem that was growing rather than shrinking. Brent kept looking at his screen, then at a printed list in his hand, then back at his screen. I went back to my projections. About 20 minutes before boarding was scheduled to begin, the overhead speakers crackled and Brent's voice came through. "Ladies and gentlemen, we'd like to make a brief announcement regarding Flight 214 to Atlanta. We are currently showing the flight as full. If any passengers are willing to voluntarily give up their seat in exchange for a travel voucher, please come to the desk at this time." I didn't look up. This is a routine announcement. It happens on full flights. I've heard it hundreds of times. Several people around me shifted in their seats, and a couple stood and drifted toward the counter. I kept reading. Then, about 10 minutes later, Brent's voice came through again, but this time, he wasn't using the overhead speaker. He was walking the gate area himself, checking boarding passes, and he stopped in front of a woman 2 seats down from me and spoke quietly to her. She shook her head firmly. He nodded and moved on. He stopped at another man across the aisle. Same conversation, same outcome. And then he stopped in front of me. "Ma'am, I'm sorry to bother you." He had the practiced, carefully neutral expression of someone delivering news they know isn't going to go over well. "Are you Miss Ellison? Seat 24C?" I looked up from my binder. "I am." "I'm so sorry, but I'm going to need to speak with you about your reservation." I set my binder down slowly. "What about my reservation?" He glanced down at his printed list, then back at me, and I could see him calculating how to phrase something. "We have a situation this morning where we need to accommodate a priority passenger, and unfortunately your seat has been identified for reallocation. We'd like to offer you." "I'm sorry," I said, keeping my voice perfectly pleasant. Did you say my seat has been identified for reallocation? Yes, ma'am. We're offering a $250 travel voucher and a seat on our next available flight to Atlanta, which departs at. When does that flight depart? A small pause. 2:45 this afternoon. I looked at my watch. It was 6:52 in the morning. So, you'd like me to wait approximately 8 hours. I understand this is inconvenient, and we truly appreciate. Who is the priority passenger? I asked. Brent blinked. People don't usually ask that, I suppose. They either accept the deal, or they argue about the inconvenience. They don't typically ask the name. I'm not able to share that information, he said carefully. Can you tell me the reason for the priority designation? Another pause. Longer this time. It's a corporate priority reservation. I let that sit for a moment. Corporate priority. On a Harlow air flight. I tilted my head just slightly. Is it a Harlow corporate priority? Brent's expression shifted. Not dramatically, he was too professional for that, but something flickered behind his eyes. I'm not able to go into the specifics, ma'am. I really am sorry. But we do need to resolve this fairly quickly, so we can complete our boarding process. I closed my binder. I folded my hands on top of it. I looked at Brent and I said, very calmly, I have a meeting in Atlanta at 2 o'clock that I cannot reschedule. I booked this seat 6 weeks ago. I arrived on time. And with respect, I'd like to understand the policy basis for involuntary reassignment before I agree to anything. Brent straightened slightly. He was trying. I could see that. He wasn't a bad employee. He was a pressured one, which is a very different thing. Our policy allows for priority reallocation in certain circumstances, when confirmed reservations are affected. We always attempt to secure voluntary surrenders first, and when that's not possible, we may need to proceed with involuntary reallocation with compensation. And is $250 the standard compensation for involuntary reallocation on a segment of this duration? He hesitated. It's within our standard range. Within your standard range, I repeated. I picked up my binder. I'd like to speak to a supervisor, please. The word supervisor produces a very specific reaction in gate agents. Not fear, exactly, more like the kind of weary resignation of someone who has had a long day, and it isn't even 7 in the morning. Brent gave a small nod and excused himself to the counter. He and Shelley exchanged a few words, and Shelley disappeared through a staff door. A few minutes passed. The gate area was starting to fill up more as boarding time approached, and I was aware of a couple of other passengers nearby who had clearly been listening, the way passengers always do when there's a gate conflict in their vicinity. The supervisor who appeared was a woman named Donna Kress. I know her full name because she introduced herself to me properly, which I noted as a good sign. She was in her late 40s, with the composed, slightly battle-worn efficiency of someone who had been managing airport operations for a very long time. She walked me a short distance from the seating area, near the windows that looked out onto the tarmac, and she spoke quietly. Ms. Ellison, I understand there's a concern about your seat reassignment. There is, I said. I'd like to understand who the priority passenger is and what the designation is based on. Donna had a tablet in her hand. She glanced at it, then back at me. She seemed to make a decision. The designation was placed by our corporate accounts team at the request of a customer in our premier business tier. The request came in late last night, after my booking was confirmed. Yes. And the policy for overriding a confirmed economy booking with a premier business corporate request. Can you walk me through that? Donna looked at me steadily. It's an internal protocol for high-value corporate accounts. It's not something that's outlined in public-facing policy, but it is a practice. And there it was. That was the sentence that crystallized everything. It's a practice. Not a published policy. Not a transparent process. A quiet, internal practice of bumping ordinary passengers for the convenience of high-spending corporate clients. I knew it existed. I had been told about it years ago when I first took over, and at the time I had flagged it as something to review, and then other things happened as other things always do, and it got buried in the machinery of running a large company. And now here I was in a gate area at O'Hare being personally subjected to it at 6:55 in the morning, and somehow it felt different from the inside. I looked out at the tarmac for a moment. The plane was there, a Harlow Air Airbus A320, navy blue livery with the silver pinstripe along the fuselage that I had approved in a branding review 3 years ago. My company's plane. My company's gate. My company's policy bumping me off my seat. I turned back to Donna. Can I ask who the premier business account is? I'm not able to share that, I'm afraid. Is it possible, I said slowly, that the premier business passenger is traveling on a Harlow corporate account? Donna's expression didn't change, but her eyes did.
Just barely.
I'm not able to confirm account details. I appreciate that, I said. I'd like to ask you one more thing. What is your protocol if the passenger being bumped is a senior officer of Harlow Aviation Group? The silence that followed that question was extraordinary. It was the kind of silence that has texture to it. You could almost feel Donna's mind moving through it, reassessing, recalibrating. She looked at me. Really looked at me. The way people do when they're suddenly trying to reconcile the person in front of them with new information that doesn't fit the image they'd assembled. I'm sorry, she said. I reached into my bag and took out my wallet. I removed a card, not a credit card, not a loyalty card. My Harlow Aviation Group Executive Identification Card. It has my name on it. My full name, Cara Harlow,
CEO.
I held it out to her. I watched Donna Cress read it. I watched her read it a second time. I watched her look up at me with the expression of a person who has just discovered that the ground they were standing on is considerably less stable than they thought. Ms. Harlow, she said. Her voice was entirely different now, not sycophantic, to her credit, but genuinely thrown. I didn't realize. There's no reason you would have, I said. I fly under my maiden name. I always do. I put the card back in my wallet. I'm not raising this to cause a problem for you, Donna, or for Brent, or for anyone on your team today.
I want to be clear about that.
But I am going to stay on this flight. And I am going to have some questions afterward that I'll need answers to. She nodded immediately. Of course. Please, let me get you sorted. I'd like to keep my original seat, I said.
24C is fine.
She blinked, as if expecting me to demand a first-class upgrade or some dramatic restitution.
Of course, she said again.
And the priority passenger?
I asked.
Donna looked at her tablet. Something crossed her face. I'll need to make a call. She stepped away. I watched her through the window, talking rapidly into her phone, her back slightly turned. I could see Brent at the counter watching us with the wide-eyed expression of a man who deeply, fundamentally wished he had called in sick that morning. It took about 4 minutes. Donna came back and she told me, quietly, that the priority passenger was a regional sales director from one of our mid-tier corporate accounts, a logistics firm called Nexon Freight Solutions. His name was Darren Cole, and he had called the corporate accounts line the night before and requested the seat reassignment because, and I am not making this up, he wanted a specific window seat that was already occupied, and the next best available option was 24C. He wanted a specific window seat. He had bumped a confirmed passenger, who turned out to be the CEO of the airline, because he preferred one seat over another. I absorbed this information quietly. Where is Mr. Cole now? Donna glanced toward the gate area. He hasn't boarded yet. She looked again. He's at the counter. With Brent. I looked over. There was a man at the counter, probably in his mid-40s, broad-shouldered, in a good suit, with the carry-on posture of someone accustomed to being accommodated. He was leaning on the counter and talking to Brent in the relaxed manner of someone who expected the conversation to go exactly the way he wanted it to. I didn't approach him.
I didn't need to.
I told Donna I was going to take my seat, that ID like a record pulled of the account activity related to this morning's reassignment request, and that I'd be in touch with our corporate accounts team after the Atlanta meeting. Donna looked faintly ill, but nodded. Absolutely. I am so sorry, Miss Harlow. Please don't be, I said. This has actually been very useful. I walked back to the gate seating area, picked up my binder, and sat back down in my original spot. I watched Brent explain to Darren Cole, with visible discomfort, that the seat reassignment was no longer going to be possible. I watched Darren Cole's expression shift from relaxed entitlement to irritated confusion to something that looked very much like the beginning of an argument. I watched him gesture with his hand in the way people gesture when they believe they are about to leverage something. I watched him say something to Brent that made Brent straighten up and repeat himself more firmly. I went back to my financial projections. Darren Cole boarded the flight. He took his original seat, not the window seat he wanted because that passenger hadn't been bumped either. He was in the middle of his row, 3 rows behind me. I didn't introduce myself. I didn't say anything to him at all. I simply sat in 24C, opened my tray table when we reached cruising altitude, spread my papers out, and worked.
But I was thinking the whole time.
I was thinking about Donna Kress, who had been doing her job under a policy framework that nobody had handed her in clear language, but that she had understood to mean corporate money takes precedence over ordinary reservations. I was thinking about Brent, who had walked that gate area, approaching passenger after passenger trying to find someone willing to give up their seat so that a man in a good suit could have a window view. I was thinking about the passengers who had said no, and the ones who might not have known they could. I was thinking about every ordinary traveler on that plane who had booked their seat weeks in advance and shown up on time and followed every rule and had no idea that somewhere in our corporate accounts system there was a quiet mechanism that could simply unmake their reservation if the right person made the right call to the right number. And I was thinking about how I had flagged it years ago, and it had gotten buried. That is the thing about running a large organization that nobody tells you when you're first handed the keys. The distance between the top and the edge is enormous, and things fall through that distance constantly, silently, invisibly, until one day you're sitting in seat 24C on your own airplane, and you are the thing that has fallen. I landed in Atlanta at 10:20. I had a car waiting, booked in my own name, no flags there, and I went straight to the operations center on the north side of the city, which is a large, modern building that smells like carpet cleaner and printer toner, and the particular brand of coffee our operations teams favor. I have always liked that building. It feels functional and unglamorous and real. My assistant, Neva, met me in the lobby. Neva has worked with me for 4 years, and she is the only person on earth who can read my face accurately enough to know that what looks like calm is sometimes not calm at all. "Good flight?" she asked. "Informative," I said. She looked at me for half a second longer than usual. "That good, huh? I need you to pull the full account file for Nexon Freight Solutions before the meeting," I said. "And I need a summary of our corporate accounts escalation protocol, specifically the section on priority seat reassignment. And I need the names of the team leads who were on the corporate accounts line last night between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. Neva was already writing. "Anything else? Get me the contact information for whoever heads customer experience at the O'Hare Hub." She looked up. "Should I be worried?" "Not about the board meeting," I said. "Let's go." The board meeting ran 3.5 hours and covered quarterly performance targets, a proposed route expansion into secondary Southeast markets, and a fairly heated discussion about fuel hedging strategy. I sat at the head of the table and ran it the way I always do, with the files Neva had prepped in front of me and most of my attention on the room rather than the documents, because the documents I've already read and the room is where the real information lives. Our board is 11 people, and I know all of them well enough to read the undercurrent beneath the formal discussion. It was a productive meeting. The route expansion got conditionally approved. The fuel hedging debate was tabled for a follow-up working session. After the room cleared, I asked our COO, Marcus Webb, to stay behind. Marcus is one of the people I trust most in the company. He's been with Harlow Aviation since before my father stepped down, and he has the rare quality of being someone who tells me the truth even when he suspects I want to enjoy it. I told him what had happened that morning. He was quiet for a long time after I finished. Then he said, "You want to know how many times a week that happens?" It wasn't really a question. "Yes," I said. "I don't know the exact number," he said. "But it's not a small number, Cara." "I know." I leaned back in my chair. "That's what bothers me." The thing I needed Marcus to understand, the thing I needed to be clear about before I did anything, was that I was not angry at Donna or Brent. I was not particularly angry at Darren Cole, though I had some thoughts about his specific choices that morning. What I felt with a clarity that only comes from sitting in the middle of something you created, was responsible. The policy existed because we had built it. The culture that made a regional sales director comfortable calling an overnight line and requesting a seat reassignment existed because we had built that too. The gap between what we said we valued, reliable, fair, customer-first travel, and what we actually did when a corporate account made a phone call, that gap was ours to close. Marcus nodded slowly. "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking we sunset the priority seat reassignment protocol entirely," I said. Voluntary surrender only, at standard compensation rates that we publish publicly. If we need to accommodate corporate accounts on full flights, we buy standby inventory like everyone else. The big accounts won't love that. They'll adjust, I said. And the ones who don't, honestly, Marcus, the ones who think they should be able to bump a confirmed passenger because they want a window seat, those aren't the accounts I want to build the next decade around. He considered that. Timeline? 30 days for the protocol change. 90 days for full implementation with training. I want Donna Kress at O'Hare in the pilot group for the rollout. He raised an eyebrow slightly. The gate supervisor, who almost bumped you? She managed a very awkward situation professionally and with genuine grace, I said. That's exactly the kind of person I want helping us design the new process. Marcus made a note. What about the Nexon account? I had thought about this on the plane, looking at my financial projections and thinking about Darren Cole 3 rows back. Pull the full account history. If Darren Cole's move this morning is consistent with how they operate, if the escalation was routine for them, if it's been done before, then I want to have a frank conversation with their procurement lead about what a partnership with Harlow actually looks like. We're not a car service they can reroute on demand. And if it was a one-time overreach, then it's a conversation about expectations, I said. Not a termination. But it's a conversation either way. Marcus closed his notebook. He had the expression he gets when he agrees with something, but is also anticipating the complexity of executing it. You know this is going to surface some other things. I know. When you start pulling on the priority reassignment thread, there are probably other informal practices attached to it. Good, I said. I want to see them. He stood up, pushing his chair back. I'll get the team on it. And Cara?
Yeah.
For what it's worth, the fact that you still fly coach and know what it actually feels like.
He paused. Your father was right about that.
I smiled. He was right about a lot of things. I flew back to Chicago that evening on a Harlow air flight that departed on time, with no drama, with a gate team that processed boarding efficiently and a cabin crew that did their jobs with the quiet confidence that most of our people carry every single day, without recognition. I sat in another middle seat. I had deliberately not changed my booking, and I ate the pretzels and drank the ginger ale and watched the lights of the Midwest pass below me in the dark. I thought about the woman who had been sitting next to me at the gate that morning, before the whole thing started. A woman in her 60s with reading glasses pushed up on her head and a tote bag from what looked like a library book sale. She had been doing a crossword puzzle with complete absorption. She hadn't been asked if she'd give up her seat. Brent had walked right past her. I wondered whether that was coincidence or whether he had somehow read something in her, some air of settled, immovable purpose, and skipped her without fully deciding to.
I think about people like that.
The quiet ones. The crossword puzzle women. The ones who aren't demanding anything, aren't flagging themselves as difficult, aren't pressing any buttons, just sitting there with their ticket that they bought and their seat that they were assigned and their entirely reasonable expectation that those things mean something. They should mean something. That's the whole agreement. You book a seat, you show up, you get on the plane. That's the agreement. Everything else, the upgrades, the lounges, the priority lines, those are additions. But the base agreement should be inviolable. And if I had created a system where the base agreement could be quietly dissolved by a phone call the night before, then the agreement wasn't real. And an agreement that isn't real isn't a business. It's a performance. The wheels touched down at O'Hare at 9:47. The policy change went into effect 28 days later. We published it publicly, a single paragraph in plain language on our website under passenger rights, and a more detailed version in the corporate accounts handbook. The reactions were roughly what Marcus had predicted. Mild grumbling from a handful of large accounts, a couple of calls to our VP of corporate sales that he handled with his customary steadiness, and one fairly aggressive email from a procurement director at a company I will not name who used the phrase, "diminish service quality" 4 times in 3 paragraphs. We responded politely and specifically and did not change anything. Donna Kress was brought into the rollout working group, as I had requested. She turned out to have extremely sharp instincts for process design and a gift for anticipating the edge cases, the moments where a new policy would create friction rather than resolve it. I made a note that she should be in conversation with our hub operations leadership about longer-term development opportunities. Brent, as far as I know, went on having long mornings at the gate counter, and probably still approaches the announcement microphone with the energy of a man who would prefer to be somewhere else. Which is completely fair. Most of us feel that way about parts of our jobs. Darren Cole and I never spoke. His company's account remained active. The call I had asked Marcus to schedule with their procurement lead happened in the 5th week, and the outcome was, I'm told, a productive conversation about mutual expectations. Nobody got fired. Nobody made headlines. Things adjust, which is usually how change actually works when you do it deliberately rather than reactively. I've been asked occasionally, by people who find out about that morning, which happens because Marcus told someone who told someone, as these things always go, whether I felt any satisfaction in that moment at the gate when Donna read my card and understood what had happened. And the honest answer is that satisfaction isn't quite the right word. What I felt was more like clarity. A clean, unambiguous understanding of something that had been blurry at a distance and was suddenly in sharp focus. And with clarity, responsibility. And with responsibility, the specific kind of tiredness that comes from knowing you have work to do that you should have done sooner. The seat didn't feel like a victory. It felt like data. The best kind, the kind you can actually use. My father used to say that the only way to know if you're running a good company is to be one of your own customers with none of your own advantages. He said it so many times that it became wallpaper, the kind of wisdom you hear so often it stops registering. I heard it freshly that Tuesday morning in seat 24C, with my pretzels and my ginger ale and my binder of projections and my very ordinary view of the back of someone else's headrest. The plane was mine.
The seat was mine.
The company was mine. And for about 15 minutes, none of that meant anything at all. That's worth knowing. That's worth flying coach for. Every single time.